The government has announced the new ceiling price for chicken, with prices capped at RM9.40 per kg.
Malaysia will end its price controls for chicken and eggs by July and leave their prices to be determined by market forces.
That clearly shows that the chicken price ceiling is a pressing concern in Malaysia. Today, we will explore this topic in more detail and discuss its impact. Let's begin. Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Nurilizatul Mardia with ID 20251247881. Will be presenting with my group members Siti Nuraisha and Zaini Husna about the price ceiling of the chicken in Malaysia. Let's start with the basic. A price ceiling is the maximum price set by the government for a particular good or service. It is usually imposed on essential items like food, fuel, or medicine to make them more affordable for the public. This ceiling is typically set below the market equilibrium price, which is the price where supply meets demand. The main goal is to protect consumers from sudden price hikes, especially during times of crisis or inflation. However, while it benefits consumers in the short term, it can also have negative effects on producers. Negative effects on producers, such as when prices are kept artificially low, producers may not be able to cover their costs. This can lead to shortage, reduced supply, or even lower quality products, as producers try to cut costs to stay afloat. To address this challenge, the government stepped in with financial support. A total of 3.8 billion in subsidies was allocated to help poultry producers to cope with the price ceiling. How was the issue of the price ceiling of the chicken start in Malaysia? In June 2021, Malaysia was still grappling with the economic effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Many households experienced reduced income and purchasing power. At the same time, on February 2022, the Ukraine-Russia war disrupted global supply chain, particularly affecting the cost of poultry feed, which is a major input in chicken farming. This combined pressure led the Malaysian government to consider intervening in the poultry market to stabilize prices and ensure affordability for consumers. This set the stage for the introduction of the price ceiling on standard whole chicken. This move was intended to keep the chicken affordable for Malaysian households, especially for P40 income group who rely heavily on chicken as a primary source of protein. In February 2022, the government officially imposed a price ceiling on chicken. The ceiling was set at RM8.90 per kilogram for standard whole chicken. To support poultry farmers who were struggling with rising feed costs, the government also introduced subsidies. The dual approach, price control and financial support, was aimed at balancing the need of both consumer and producers. It was a critical moment as the government had to ensure the chicken remained affordable without causing farmers to exit the market due to unprofitability. In July 2022, the government had planned to float chicken prices and allow the market to determine the price. However, due to ongoing concerns about the inflation and supply stability, the plan was delayed. Instead, the price ceiling was increased slightly to RM9.40 per kilogram and the subsidies were continued. This decision reflected the government's cautious approach, trying to gradually transition to market pricing while still protecting consumers from sudden high prices. Finally, in November 2023, the government officially lifted the chicken price ceiling. The rationale was the chicken prices had stabilized and the market supply was sufficient. This marked a return to free market pricing, where prices are determined by supply and demand without government intervention. It is also signaled confidence that the poultry industry had recovered enough to operate independently and that consumers could now handle the price adjustment.
My name is Siti Nuraisha binti Muhammad Hatta. My matrix number is 2025129113. Today I'll be explaining the effects of introducing and later dissolving a price ceiling in Malaysia, comparing theoretical expectations with actual outcomes, and also discuss why those effects occurred. Let's start with the effects of introducing price ceiling. A price ceiling is a policy tool used by the government to keep essential goods affordable for consumers, especially during times of inflation or economic uncertainty. Theoretically, Setting a price ceiling below the market equilibrium leads to lower consumer prices. In Malaysia, this was the intended goal, and in many ways, it was successful. Despite global supply chain disruptions and inflation, the prices of essential items, especially poultry like chicken, remained relatively stable. This outcome was largely due to active enforcement by the government. The government monitored retail outlets, published ceiling price lists, and ensured that traders did not exceed the allowed limits. However, theory also warns of market inefficiency. A price ceiling can lead to a shortage where demand exceeds supply. This happened in Malaysia when the retail price was set below production cost. Farmers and suppliers who had to deal with rising feed and labor costs found it unsustainable to keep supplying at the capped price. As a result, many scaled back production. This created a supply gap where consumers wanted more than what the market could offer. Black markets then started to appear, just as theory predicts. When formal channels can't meet demand, consumers start looking elsewhere. In Malaysia, during festive periods like Hari Raya, demand spiked even more. Due to shortages, some people began hoarding, while others paid higher prices off the record. These unofficial sales defeated the purpose of the ceiling and in some cases hurt consumers even more. On the issue of product quality, theory suggests that when producers can't make enough profit, they may cut corners. In practice, some Malaysian consumers noticed that chickens were smaller in size or inconsistent in quality. This wasn't random. It reflected a real adjustment by producers who tried to stay within their limited margins by reducing input costs, like feed quality or processing time. Now, let's talk about the government's role. Theory makes it clear that for a price ceiling to function without collapsing supply, the government must provide support, often through subsidies. That is exactly what happened. The Malaysian government offered subsidies to farmers and distributors, allowing them to partially cover their costs. This kept the supply chain going, but it also meant higher public spending and reliance on continuous government involvement. Now, moving on to the second part, what happened when the price ceiling was removed? Theoretically, lifting a price ceiling can cause prices to rise quickly, at least in the short term. In Malaysia, prices did increase, but not as sharply as expected. Why? Because the government implemented the change gradually, and by that time, the supply situation had already improved. The result was a smoother transition with minimal consumer shock. As for supply, removing the ceiling restored producers' profit motivation. Freed from the price limit, farmers and traders had a reason to scale up production. This helped normalize supply, which in turn stabilized prices naturally rather than through artificial controls. In theory, market efficiency also improves once price ceiling was removed, and that was evident here too. The market became more flexible. Producers could now adjust prices based on real-time cost and demand. The government intervention was no longer needed at every stage. This flexibility is critical for long-term economic health. One concern, however, is the effect on lower-income consumers. Theory suggests that without price control, vulnerable groups may struggle with affordability. In Malaysia, this was a valid worry, but the impact was moderated by how the ceiling was lifted. Since the transition was gradual and supply was stable, the price increase was manageable. This highlights how thoughtful policy design can soften negative impacts on the public. Finally, let's look at the producer side. Economic theory predicts that without a price ceiling, producers can reinvest and grow, which benefits the overall industry. In Malaysia, poultry farmers supported the policy change. They reported less financial pressure and greater room to plan for the future. Some were even able to reinvest in equipment or expand their operation, a sign of recovery and confidence returning to the sector. To sum up, many of the theoretical predictions were indeed accurate. We saw lower prices, shortages, black markets, and quality issues during the ceiling period. Then, increased supply, improved efficiency, and producer support after its removal. But what really shaped the outcome was how the policies was implemented. In Malaysia, government enforcement, financial subsidies, and careful policy timing played a huge role in minimizing the negative effects and guiding the transition. This case reminds us that economic models are just the starting point. Real-world result depends on thoughtful execution and adaptive governance.
Hi, my name is Zayan Yusna, and now I will explain more on graph of price ceiling. Firstly, from the graph, we can see that the price ceiling is set below market equilibrium price. At a lower price, the quantity demand increased to Q2 as more consumers are willing to buy chicken at a cheaper price. At the same time, the quantity supply decreased to Q1 since the producers are less willing to supply chicken at a lower profit margin, and this leads to shortage. Next, in 2022, Malaysian government has made a change towards price ceiling of chicken. The first maximum price is RM8.90. When the price ceiling at RM8.90, producers are discouraged due to lower profit, but at the same time consumers want more at the lower price. Later, government adjusts upward to RM9.40 due to market pressures such as rising production costs and the shortage increases. When the price ceiling at RM9.40, it is closer to the market price and it aims to reduce the shortage by helping balance the supply and demand more effectively. However, it is still below market equilibrium but with a smaller shortage. There are few solutions to address problems caused by price ceiling. The first one is government can subsidize the producers to lower their production costs but increase the supply even at the lower price. For example, chicken farmers receive subsidies for feed, transport or labor. In 2022, Malaysia government has introduced rationing system on chicken to ensure fair distribution, which means that each family can buy only a limited amount of chicken per week at a controlled price. Other than that, Malaysia government also have give a direct financial aid to low-income groups like Bantuan Tunai Rahmah instead of controlling the chicken price for everyone. This has allowed the market to operate at equilibrium while ensuring the poor still can afford buy basic goods. Another way in the future may be government may temporarily import the product to fill the supply gap and reduce the shortage. The most important way to solve price ceiling issue is educate consumers. The consumers need to be informed about consumers' responsible consumptions and how panic buying can worsen the shortage under price control.
To conclude all of our discussion, we can clearly see that the chicken price ceiling in Malaysia was at its core a government intervention. This intervention proved crucial during a global crisis, specifically the challenges brought on by the pandemic and global conflicts that affected both consumer purchasing power and production costs. The primary goal was to secure food security for all income groups, ensuring that essential protein remain affordable and accessible. What is important to note is that after the initial crisis stabilized, the price was brought under control post-global crisis by the free market. This transition allowed both consumers and producers to gain equal rights in the market. Producers could once again operate with better margins, lead to normalized supply while consumers continued to benefit from stable prices and sufficient availability. Essentially, this case highlights how strategic government intervention can be a vital tool during uncertain times, bridging the gap until market forces can naturally restore the balance and benefit all the stakeholders. That's all from us. Thank you.